Welcome to Building Better Businesses, an ABA podcast. Learn firsthand from business owners who've built successful ABA businesses. Utilize proven techniques and strategies to help your practice thrive. This is Building Better Businesses, an ABA podcast with Jonathan Mueller.
John Austin is a CEO and founder of Reaching Results and an internationally recognized coach to business leaders on safety and human performance. He and his teams have coached leaders in hundreds of companies in 12 countries. He's published more than 100 articles and 3 books on the topic. And before founding Reaching Results, he was a professor of psychology for 15 years at Western Michigan University. John, welcome to the pod.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Jonathan. I appreciate it, man.
Oh, I appreciate you coming on.
I like to say, the 100 papers that you mentioned that I published, it's 100 papers that no one's ever read.
Right, dude. So humble and modest. Yet you have like such a powerful message for our, for our world and for our field. And like your work and your life mission is predicated on a simple but really powerful concept. And it's like, there's a basic human right to have a safe place to work. Can you tell me more about that?
Yeah. Oh, well, boy, there's a lot to say about that. I think it comes from, if I think about kind of my backstory, I came from a family that I was the only person to ever go to college. And so everybody around me, like, quote, worked for a living, and I got like, you were the academic, like, what are you ever going to do with books, dude? Like, get a hammer, and so they worked for real jobs, man, like doing construction or like in restaurants, or my mom was a bartender and stuff like that. And they worked in physically unsafe environments a lot of times. And I saw people who I loved getting hurt when they were just really trying to put food on the table. Like that was their goal. It wasn't like Maslow's hierarchy at the top or anything, man. It was like, let's see if we can feed everybody. Right. And then they also worked in psychologically unsafe environments, and they wouldn't have never said that like 40, 50 years ago or whatever. But it just, they worked in crappy places, with bosses that made them feel awful a lot of times, and many times like took advantage of them. And so I think that it just kind of evolved over time by following my interests, and I think a lot of them naturally sprung out of those kind of foundational experiences where I saw people who I loved and cared about trying to, like, high integrity, honest people working really hard and not really getting ahead, and also having stress related, illnesses and like physical illnesses and injuries at work. When we have the science to make the work better, And so, like, as I learned more and more about it, as in college and in grad school, I was like, wow, this is something that we really need.
Yeah, I like how you described that Maslow, right? Like, right now, I don't know if we're on self-actualization, right, at the pinnacle of the pyramid, but like this began as very basic physical safety. And both physical and psychological safety are critical. So I'm curious, like, for an ABA organization, like, what do they need to do to get right this and create this environment of psychological safety?
Yeah, it's a really good question. I think that there are a lot of elements, but they're all boiling down, in my mind, over the last 30 years of kind of like tracking this and trying to get better at it. It all boils down to one thing that ABA hasn't studied very much, and that is relationships. And so if you start to think about like what drives our relationships and what causes us to have effective and deep and caring relationships, you start to unpack some things, some of which really aren't considered important in ABA, or at least when I was kind of really getting my foundational ABA training, they weren't really considered important. So, like, for example, like giving feedback, can be a really caring thing, and it could also be a really caustic and aversive thing. The same exact words. Right. So, I find that fascinating, because when I learned how to give feedback, it was like, well, just be honest and pinpointed and operationalize what you're talking about. and be 100%, like, if you're 100% honest, it's on them. Like, then if it hurts their feelings, then they got to just deal with that, you know? But I don't see it that way anymore at all. Like, I think I've evolved just from the many people that I've worked with have shaped my behavior over time to realize that, I mean, when I put it this way, it seems obvious, right? But like, it wasn't a big consideration about how people received it. It was just like, well, maybe you can say it in a slightly different way, but you still got to be completely honest and stuff, right? And so it's, I think it's like when I first read Crucial Conversations, that book, that really spoke to me, because they talk about the fool's choice. And the fool's choice is, I'm either going to be honest or I'm going to be respectful, but I can't be both in many cases, right? And so, and like that same topic comes up in Radical Candor. So, and I can tell you more about that, but I want to take a pause and let you react.
Yeah, I mean, both those books, by the way, like, are profound. I don't know, there is that a fool's choice. It feels like a false choice, like that we can't provide both honest and sort of compassionate or respectful feedback. I don't know. To me, but I like what you described, like, at the heart, it feels like, of being human beings in relationships. So a measure of psychological safety is the quality of the relationship.
Yeah.
And, and I just wonder, is there like a score? Maybe this is thinking too simplistically. Is there like a scorecard or some diagnostic tool that an organization could use to measure psychological safety?
Oh, tons, man. Right. Like, I always like the, I don't know if you remember the Malcolm Gladwell stories around like Van Halen, who used to ask for so they would have a specific setup on the stage that required certain amounts of weight to be borne on the stage and stuff like that. So it had to be set up properly. And they would ask for like little minuscule things in their rider, like, a jar full of brown M&Ms or something like that, right? And if they weren't there in the checklist, then they would further investigate like a lot of the setup that was a lot more important for the stage, right? So it was like kind of like an indicator, right? Like, it was like a
canary in the coal mine.
Yeah, right. It was like a downstream measure, right? And so the question is, like, what are those in your organization? And it may be different for every organization, but some of the ones that I see are like, okay, you send out a survey and you get a 50% response rate. Or maybe it's 70% and it's not 100 still, right? Right. Or people report being disciplined or fired, terminated, and being surprised. Like, that should never happen, right? Like, that should be a major negative indicator, but yet it does happen. Or people leave without their supervisor knowing. Now, that sometimes can't be avoided, but like, so I don't know, these are difficult to measure, but like the survey one, you could definitely get your hands around.
Yeah. You know what? We at Ascend, we do the same thing. We don't just send out like an ENPS or whatever the survey is, and don't just measure that. Yes, that's important. Measure your response rate. And if you're seeing low response rates, at best, it means the team's maybe not totally engaged, which is sort of presents a set of challenges in and of itself. But at worst, to your point, means like maybe there's not psychological safety. And this term comes, I've always said, John, that like, communication moves at the speed of trust. And I think the same applies to feedback. Like, feedback too moves at the speed of trust.
Yeah, absolutely. No question. I mean, we all have had these experiences where, we get feedback from someone and we just disregard it. Or we are super defensive about it. And in the same light, we get similar feedback. It might even be the same words from a different person, and we're really grateful to have it. You know what I mean? Like, why is that? Well, it's not only about us. I mean, it is partly us getting in the right mindset and accepting the feedback and stuff, but it's also that relationship. That's what you're getting the indication, the downstream impact of the way you've been treated in the past.
Well, and isn't there some to that point around defensiveness and like accepting feedback? I mean, we have fight or flight mechanisms for a reason, right? To survive. And so we've been not conditioned. We have to condition ourselves, therefore, to look at feedback as a gift. Or do you remember the Wheaties commercials from the 80s? Like breakfast, eat your Wheaties, breakfast of champions. Oh, and it was so cheesy and it was perfect and beautiful. And the 80s were just like the greatest decade ever. But that's a separate topic. But like feedback, has to be like, we have to reorient to like feedback is our breakfast of champions. And that's a hard thing, I think, to condition ourselves to do.
Yeah. Yeah. So one of the things along those lines that I love recommending to leaders and working with them on is how do you solicit feedback more effectively? You know, and how do you build that into your life? Like, you know, it's charging right now, but I've got, you know, my Aura ring.
Oh yeah,
man. Like, so I get feedback. I solicit effectively. I solicit feedback on my sleep and my activity and all kinds of other kind of things that roll into my sleep score on that, right? But you don't have to have an Aura ring. You could just ask people in a, you know, a standard kind of way, or get some routines or practices involved there. So there's a guy who I really like. I've learned a ton from with regard to this, and that's Marshall Goldsmith. So for your listeners, if you haven't read What Got You Here Won't Get You There, that is essential reading that isn't on any ABA reading list or anything like that, but it's like the 20 or 21 behaviors that you have to stop doing as a leader. And when you start reading through them, they're like, I'm thinking, the reason I love it is because I read it, I'm like, yep, I do that one. Yep, I do that. Oh, damn, I did that one just a minute ago, you know? And so we're all kind of sinners when it comes to that, to some extent, right? I mean, it's all about the environment you create for yourself to do and say the right things. I mean, it's behavior analysis.
So, you know, that's interesting because we always think about the environment, for example, we're creating for kids when we're delivering treatment, or the environment we're creating for our teens. Yeah. I don't think I've ever heard it framed as what is the environment you're creating for yourself that you're getting those feedback loops, creating self-awareness and learning.
Yeah. So Marshall Goldsmith has an exercise that is called Feed Forward. And like, he's got a blog. He makes a big deal out of being a Buddhist. So he's like, I give everything away, just like use it. Don't even credit me. You know, it doesn't matter. I'm not going to know about it when I die anyway, you know, that kind of thing. So you can check out his blog, and he's got tons of really cool tools on there that he's used. But one of them is I use frequently in workshops, and that is like, think about something you would like to improve about your own behavior right now. Like, it could be my sleep, or it could be my time management, or as my friend Jim Carr says, task management. It could be that. Or it could be, I don't know, using positive reinforcement or anything, right? Like, think about something that you'd like to improve, a good tangible pinpoint that's measurable, and then find some trusted people. Maybe they're coworkers, maybe they're direct reports, or maybe they're outside of the organization, and tell them, hey, I'm trying to improve my time management. What would you suggest? And, you know, it's even better if it's people who work with you, who can see the time management or whatever it is that you're trying to improve. So they see evidence of it, right? And so you ask for their feedback, and then you just say, thank you. You don't explain, well, I've already tried that, or no, that won't work. Right. Or, that's just defensiveness. That's not good practice when you're accepting feedback. You just thank them and be grateful that they paid attention to you for a minute, right? And gave you that gift.
It's a gift, and it's doubly powerful because not only then are you getting this feedback, but, you know, as a leader, as a CEO of an organization, you're modeling for them what that means to ask for feedback.
Yeah. And then there's the second part, which is even I think more important, right? And that is, say, thank you for that feedback. Could I like come back to you in a few weeks and ask you how I'm doing on this? And everyone will say yes. And then you just check back with them it's a 5-minute conversation. Like, how do you feel like I've been doing? Let's say it's I've had clients that in manufacturing, especially, that have a big problem with over talking. And so we had leaders who were asking feedback on over talking from their direct reports. Like, have I gotten any better at that during meetings? Right. And what Goldsmith, like, Marshall Goldsmith has a little white paper on this. It's a short white paper on this, and like he did this through a survey with 86,000 managers or something that they had worked with over the years. And what they did was they did everything I just described, but then they asked the direct reports, the people who were giving the feedback, they asked them, how much did my manager check back with me about it, and how much did I see them change? And so the perceived change was from the feedback giver's perspective, right? And it was like -3 to +3 or something like that, right? And what they found was that leaders who their feedback givers thought didn't follow up saw no change. It's almost like a normal distribution, man. It's like, and then the ones that followed up a little bit moved a little bit toward the change side, and the ones that followed up a little bit more fell further, and so forth, until you get this kind of hockey stick at the end for the leaders that followed up regularly, I think is what they call it, something like that.
So is it there's a correlation between the more you follow up, the higher the perceived change?
Yeah, isn't that interesting?
Numbers.
It's cool that you went there, because a lot of people will think, like in business, when I work that non-behavior analysts, a lot of times people will say, oh, that's cool, so the more you follow up, the more you change. It's like, yeah, and maybe, and also the more they think you change.
Yeah, which has benefits in and of itself. I'm curious, why is that so powerful? With the follow-up, is it all entirely around the perception of your team members that you're changing, or is there a heightened like accountability that you're placing on yourself as a leader that then further drives your own change?
Great question, man. I mean, I guess I would have to say both,
Yeah.
Feels like both. I mean, Goldsmith has another practice that he recommends, where you just find a partner, almost like an accountability partner, and you think of the top, I don't know, like 10 questions that you would ask about how your day went. So like, what are the top 10 things you want to be remembered by? Maybe think of it that way. He often does the deathbed kind of exercise, and like, if it's kind and caring, if it's try your best, if it's, I don't know, get enough rest or deliver some positive reinforcement, whatever it is, you ask those questions to your accountability partner. You have a phone call that's like 5 minutes, and you just answer your questions, and you tell them what the answers are. And then your partner tells you what their answers are too. And there's no judgment either way. It's just silent accountability. It's just like being present for, me reflecting.
Oh, wow.
And that's a cool experience. That's a cool exercise too. I've tried that one myself, and it's very powerful.
Wow. You know what, John, I might have to ask you to be my accountability buddy.
That would be awesome, man.
Dude, like and that's right. Like the other person doesn't even say anything, right? It's just the accountability rests in you describing. I like, let me be totally honest. Like one of the things I mean, I prize authentic relationships above all else. I love cheerleading for other people. I love positive reinforcing. And I've been deathly afraid over my career of hurting people's feelings when I provide feedback. And it's something I've had to work so, in particularly constructive feedback. So I've had to work really hard at that. And it's what's interesting is what I've learned is when I provide it like in a direct and compassionate way, it's valued. And I think there's research out there that says people want to grow and want that constructive feedback, but that's hard to condition at least it's hard to condition in me, man. So I think I need an accountability buddy in you for this.
Yeah, man, absolutely. I think many of us do. I want to say we all do, but there are people who are like exceptionally good at it, and they're working on other things. But I think that that's few and far between, honestly.
Yeah.
I think a lot of us have that same concern about hurting people's feelings, and I think I see that in ABA more than anything else when it comes to giving feedback. It's even though I have these behavior analysis skills and I can be pinpointed and identify exactly what the behavior is, I don't want to, because I feel like it's going to crash and burn, and I really need these people. Like retention is super important. So what if I make them unhappy by giving feedback? And I guess my response is, if you don't give them feedback, they're going to be unhappy.
Yeah.
Right?
100%.
It's
100%.
ironic, isn't it?
It's totally ironic. Yeah. And
Yeah.
I just reflect back to like some of the best mentors and supervisors or coaches I had, and they've given me both. Right. So that like just looking at our own experience and who is important in our growth journey, I think is helpful. But let's get down to brass tacks. And John, let's say an ABA organization does an outstanding job of creating this environment of psychological safety, right? Which takes a lot of time, intention, et cetera. And I know you've done some peer-reviewed articles on this, but like what organizational KPIs would you expect to see increase?
That's a great question. And I would say it's kind of like, asking what would increase if you used behavior analysis in therapy sessions. It's like, well, I don't know, whatever you focus on, right? Like, and literally everything you focus on, using these techniques will improve. Absolutely. And so like one of the studies you just kind of, you referred to, that I can make available for your listeners. We did it in an ABA organization, and we've done this with many ABA organizations, but this is the one peer-reviewed article that we've got out of the whole thing. They in the course that we teach, everybody is allowed to focus on whatever they think is important to drive results. And they get some coaching. It's not just like in a vacuum or anything. But the most important thing, I think, is that people can choose. They know their job and their team better than anyone. All the opportunities, we can say, I was going to say warts and all, but like all the opportunities and all the challenges, they know many of these things. And so they can pick whatever they want. And they should feel like in our course, we try to make them feel really comfortable with like picking anything that they want that will improve the performance. So it might be in that article, there were probably 20 different pinpoints. And, it was like, focus on running quality sessions. Some people focused on showing up to sessions. Some people focused on delivering more feedback. Others used video modeling to get this or that done, properly. Right. And like, so, could be any of that. I've had people focus on billable hours or utilization, or, just pick the target. If it's measurable, you can improve it. And it's not just with psychological safety, but I would say that that's kind of like a foundational building block, that allows us to operate all these things. It's almost as if I don't know if people are still really talking about this, but when like 20 years ago, we were talking about behavior modification and ABA, right? And the fundamental difference being, I'm going to tell you what the solution is versus I'm going to like do an assessment and we're going to discover what the solution is, right? Like what is it about the environment that's driving the behavior you're exhibiting right now? And let's use our knowledge of that to change the environment and get new behavior, as opposed to it's going to be punishment and positive reinforcement or whatever. Your menu's short. I think it's the same thing where with psychological safety, where it's part of how we operate. And yes, you can get things done with a behavior modification strategy by measuring and threatening. It works, man, but like you also get the negative outcomes that come along with it, right? As opposed to, and then missing out on all the potential positive things that are dragged along with a more informed kind of, diagnostic approach that involves a dialogue and psychological safety, meaning I can say what's on my mind as a victim of your solutions, We're going to talk it through, and like, you're going to get a commitment from me, or I can say, no, I'm not committed to that. Like, and here's why. And like, you're actually going to listen, and you're going to have a better solution as a result of
that. ABA practice owners, are billing and insurance issues getting you down? Well, let me tell you, Element RCM is your answer. Element provides world-class revenue cycle management services, contracting, credentialing, authorizations, billing, and more. Element's your partner, so you can focus on what you love to do, providing the highest quality services to your families and clients. Element's a preferred partner of the Behavioral Health Center of Excellence, and its founders have nearly 20 years of experience owning and operating successful ABA organizations. They understand you, They know that every dollar counts, that integrity is everything. Element works with any practice management system. And Element's not a vendor, they're your partner. So find out more and take a free revenue cycle assessment at elementrcm.ai. Yeah, I like this idea of like agency, right? Is like help like empower your teams to be able to choose something they might want to work on. And this idea of I shouldn't try to extend this too far to a video game analogy, but if psychological safety is the foundation, it's like if you're playing Super Mario Brothers and you're going to get the coins, it's just like you get one coin at a time. But you infuse the I don't know, is it the big mushroom, whatever it was.
Yeah.
And it's the same as psychological safety. If you infuse that foundation, then every coin is worth 10x.
Yes.
And so it just gives you all this stuff for free in an organization simply by starting on the foundation.
I love it.
Psychological safety.
That's great. And that's great. And if I were to add to that, I would say, you know, a lot of people think the foundation is feedback. So I get calls like, I want everyone to give robust feedback. And my response is often like, you might be 10 steps from that, man.
Right.
Or more, right? Because if someone can't say what's on their mind in a meeting, not giving feedback, but just saying an idea, then how likely is it that they're going to give their supervisor corrective feedback or coworker, right?
Totally.
I mean, not going to happen. But I've operated on teams that were high performing teams where that absolutely happened all the time. And it was super reinforcing environment. And I'm getting goosebumps just thinking back to it. And it's been years now where you get the full person, man. Like you get everything and inspiration and excitement and happiness and lots of corrective feedback, better outcomes, and lots of positive feedback, right? And positive reinforcement. That's possible.
Yeah. It absolutely is. I mean, didn't Google do, is it Project Aristotle?
Yeah.
They actually did. They sought to figure out, or the question they asked is like, what leads to the highest performing teams? And it was like nothing that they would have thought. And like, they test all these hypotheses. And then finally, like it came down to one thing effectively. I mean, it's fascinating research they did, but it came down to one thing. It was psychological safety.
Yes.
Like people is there conversational turn taking?
Yes.
Are people open and feeling like they could share? It's super powerful stuff. Like I want to hear more about your entrepreneurial journey, because you're an entrepreneur, have created Reaching Results, which is helping leaders and CEOs and organizations. What have been the highest highs and lowest low points, John?
I got to say one thing before we move to that.
Sure, please.
Just on psychological safety. If people want to learn more about it, one of the people I've learned the most about it from to get started is Amy Edmondson. So check out her book, The Fearless Organization. Or before you do that, check out a summary, like Manage Your Time Effectively, right? And like if it sounds like something you want to dive deeper in, it's a great book. So definitely check that out. The Project Aristotle is a really good read too. It's in the New Yorker, and you can find that using Google. And that's a really good resource. And then lastly, the thing that I've been led to in terms of one critical behavior is, or maybe two, and I've been giving talks on this throughout the ABA circuit. So some of your listeners might have seen me talk on this, but it's having conversations. And then the sub behavior is asking effective questions. And so, there are books, as I've become a student of this, on asking questions. And like the one I got has like 12,000 questions you can ask. And I was thinking, that's what I did. I was like, there are 12,000 questions, So like, I mean, there's a question for every season, man. Like you can coach with only questions.
Yeah, totally.
And then it displays curiosity and dialogue, and then you listen carefully and you learn, you tact behaviors that you would not have access to in the other person, So like, that is where the gold is, I think. And as we get better at that, better at measuring it, that's kind of the future, I think. Like some of the metrics ought to involve like, how well is your boss ask questions? How often do you have a dialogue? How often do you have a back and forth conversation? And how good is the person at that? Because it takes some practice.
Powerful. That's the heart of being a good coach. Is like, I think exactly that is like, how well do you ask questions? Because not only does that take intention around the questions you ask, but like you've got to be listening pretty intensively, right? As opposed to talking and trying to like get your team members to do what you need that or you want them to do. It takes some intent, like listening and understanding what their priorities are and what they're trying to accomplish.
Yeah, exactly. So I just wanted to say that we can go back to the next question.
Yeah, thanks.
This is an
Yeah,
excellent one, man. Highs and lows. Oh man, I'm so fortunate to have had the career that I have. I mean, I was at Western Michigan University for 15 years. I was a full professor and tenured, and couldn't have gotten fired if I tried. Unfortunately, it's true. It's nothing about my colleagues, but just how the university system works, And then I decided to resign because I felt like my why really was to help leaders use what we know about behavior more effectively. And I felt like we already know most of it, like maybe not most of it. There's probably a lot that we don't know yet, right? And the research is still important, but we know so much that we don't teach effectively. And many of us don't use, and we don't create the right conditions for ourselves to use. Even experts in ABA. I mean, think about all the people in ABA, and our lives ought to be perfect, And that's not the landscape I see. They're normal, like people are normal people, right? Yeah. And so we often don't use what we know, and so like that was the why that I kind of discovered, and I didn't feel like I was able to do it fully there. And so that's when I started my business. And so I just happened to get a call from a big global company, and I gave a talk at one of their conferences. And it's funny, I was very contrarian. Like they had a huge initiative around, I remember this, it was a manufacturing company. They had a huge initiative around hazard identification. And I was like, that's not a behavior. And they were like, wait, what? Like we're spending millions on this. Like, what are you talking about? Tell me more. And this is like from the stage with like all of their site leaders for the whole company in the room. I totally could have, they could have been like, get off the stage, dude. You know what you're talking about. And so anyway, I just told them the truth, I thought, I mean, I was just honest, and it was not a popular opinion. But after that, their biggest site hired me to do a multi-year contract. And then I got calls from many of their smaller sites, like probably half of their sites. And it really led off from, I think, just being myself and just not being afraid to have a contrarian opinion. I didn't do it for effect. I just was telling the truth. And so as we went through that, we went deep into the organization and taught at their largest site, all of their leaders, from the supervisors to the site leader. Every leader had our courses. And so I started hiring people and worked really closely with Nicole Gravina and Rich Casbor and Lisa Casbor and others. Like, we had a whole team of people. And we took them from, at that particular site, we were working on injury reduction in that case. But like the gold standard was kind of like below 1, and that's 1 person per 100 people a year injured. That's their measure, right? And so they had never been in 60 years below 1. They were like 1.2, 1.7. They were like 2 in that area. And within a year after our courses, they were below 1, and they've stayed below 1 for the last 10 years. Wow. And now I just heard that it's safer to work in their manufacturing plants than it is in their offices.
No way.
Yeah, man. So like, that's wild. So I still get calls from people in that organization. We trained 500 people, and like, everyone, how professionals do, they move on to new jobs. I got a call this week from somebody who was in my courses, haven't talked to for 10 years. He's like, I'm a director now, and we want your courses. And so like that, that's kind of, I think that's the high point. It's probably a whole series of high points. It's when people get benefit out of what I'm doing, and it saves lives, or it improves lives, or improves results, man. Because like, we know how to do this. It's not rocket science, it's behavioral science, right?
Yeah.
So there's that. And then, so low point, I'll also share a low point. When we were going through this, in the early days, I did not know very much about business. I didn't know enough about business. And so I actually told this story at Bach not long ago from the stage. And it was like a year or so, maybe a year or two into the start of the business. And I had people on staff and they were doing work, and I was traveling like every week for bringing in more work and selling, driving deeper into the organizations and stuff. And then I wasn't paying attention to the financials at all. And then we almost ran out of cash. And like, it was like, oh, if we don't win work in the next, like, I don't know, like month, we're going to close, man. Like, I won't be able to make payroll, you know?
Oh my gosh.
And I never borrowed money. And so that was one of my things. I did not borrow money. And I didn't want to. I wanted to be able to do it based on cash flow, creating enough free cash flow. So anyway, it came close, man. But like, we won a few things and it worked out. But it was really close, man. It was a really good lesson that when you take your eye off the ball as the leader, it can be very damaging. It can bring the whole organization down, man, if you're not focused on the right set of metrics.
Well said. Focus on the right set of metrics, and keep your eye on the ball. John, what's one thing every ABA business owner should start doing and one thing they should stop doing?
I think start doing. I think we can use more positive reinforcement. I just keep going back to that, man. Like, I don't know. I learned my initial round of OBM from John Bailey and Aubrey Daniels, and like that's Aubrey Daniels made a whole career out of teaching people how to use positive reinforcement. We don't do it well. We don't do it enough. So here's a challenge for you if you're a leader listening. Pick up, like, hit pause. Think of when I give you the instruction, then hit pause. Think of someone who has done something that you appreciate, and think of the impact it had on you and the organization, and pick up your phone and record a video for 30 seconds, not longer, just thanking the person for the specific thing that they did, and tell them how it made you feel, and tell them how it impacted the business or their team, and then text it to them. And you don't have to do anything else. Just send it. They might not respond. Don't get offended. Just like, try it. So that's one thing that we could all do better. I just had a conference with 200 people, and I had them all stand up and do that during the talk. It was cool.
Powerful.
Yeah. And I did one to my wife at the same time, because it was just like, while I was suffering from COVID, I was giving this talk, and I did it video, I wasn't there, but she was taking care of me and bringing me soup, and it was really, I was grateful for that. One thing they should stop doing: meetings, man. Death by meeting. Yes. Death by meetings. And I could come up with like 3 things that they should do, but the meetings, I think, I'm not saying don't meet. I'm just saying, be more critical, have a critical eye toward whether you're getting anything from the meeting. And if it's just social time, that may be okay, man. Like, that may be all right for you, but don't assume that anything good is happening in all the meetings. Most organizations can cut down on the number of attendees, and they can cut down on the number of meetings and the duration. One of my colleagues who's a coach does like 18-minute meetings. He doesn't do 30.
Oh, wow.
18 and like 42 or something like that. Like, those are your 2 options.
Wow.
It's crazy, but like, we don't need 30. Who made that up? You know what I mean? Like, you could do 23 or whatever it is. So like, attendees, time, and then structure. So most organizations don't have any metrics coming out of their meetings. So you ask them what their RBTs are doing, and they can tell you everything down to like the buttons on their shirt. And then I ask them, what do you spend most of your time doing? And they say, oh, meetings. And it's like, are you paid on your meetings? And they're like, what? What do you mean?
Yeah.
So like, hold yourself to the same standard, man. Are you getting anything done? Do you have an agenda? Do you have action items? Do people attend? Do you start and end on time? Like, there's a series of items that you could come up with to show whether your meeting's effective or not.
Powerful. Powerful. It's a Murphy's Law of meetings. Like, you're going to get done in that meeting. If you're structured, you have the right attendees and the right duration, you're going to get the right amount done. It's awesome.
Yeah.
All right. So I got to ask, because I know you love music and you're a musician. Top 3 bassists of all time.
Oh,
and
man.
Is there a song you'd recommend someone listen to?
Yes.
To see the virtuosity of bass.
Okay. All right. So I would say Countdown here, and two of them are old school. The first is number 3 would be John Paul Jones from Led Zeppelin.
Nice.
And this is just a recency thing, probably, because I've been listening to a lot of Led Zeppelin recently. My son's 13, and I'm trying to educate him, and I'm playing Zeppelin, and I'm like, do you know who this is? And he said, no. I was like, oh man, because like when you were 3, you knew who this was. Like, I just go through cycles of different, listening to different music. So okay, so John Paul Jones, the Lemon Song, I would listen to that and like listen to the bass in that, man. It's awesome. Second best, I would say Geddy Lee and Rush. And I've met him before. I met him. He signed his book, and when I bought it, it's called The Big Book of Bass. And it's like this thick encyclopedic coverage of bass guitar.
Yeah.
And so, oh man, there's so many great songs, but I'd say probably like La Villa Strangiato, or Strangiata. I don't know if it's Aro. So that'd be my top one there. And then if you were going to listen to only one song, it would be Amazing Grace by Victor Wooten. He's the number 1. So if you Google that and find a YouTube, you'll see him playing it live, and it's great, man. It's great.
Oh, I've got goosebumps, dude. Because Woo Woo is sick. So he's on my list, and I'm going to share it. But by the way, Geddy Lee, Rush. Hey, Neil Peart, who died a year ago. Rush is a gift.
Yeah,
to humans. I'm going to pick 4, but only because it's my podcast.
Yeah,
I'm going old school Charles Mingus.
Oh,
blues and roots, like some old jazz, love it. Jaco Pastorius, like 70s, like virtuoso, and he dealt with a lot of mental health stuff, and but just powerful. The Weather Report. Then I'm gonna put Steve Harris in there, just because a huge Iron Maiden fan, and I mean he just new wave British heavy metal.
I learned my first year of learning was Iron Maiden's album Iron Maiden. I just played it over and over again to learn Steve Harris licks. So,
1979, unbelievably powerful. And then the next, Victor Wooten. I mean, Woo Woo, and I've gotten to see him a handful of times live with Bela Fleck and others. And the guy, he's probably 5'2", 3, and he has this bass, and he does things on there that are magical.
Totally, man. Yeah, magical. I was lucky enough to spend a week with him at his bass nature camp, and man, it's mind-blowing. I mean, it was with 50 people maybe, and they break us into workshops, and we do workshops all day long on bass, but then they would separate it out with nature education. And so they had us to teach listening. They had us walk through the woods blindfolded with no shoes on, following a string, right? And to listen for the trees, so that you knew when to duck. Like it was like a heavy brush, like you had to kind of get through it. And so it's just like stuff like that. And then like eating dinner with a blindfold on, and then they would come and move your things, move your fork and knife, and move your plate and stuff, right? And you had to listen very carefully for it. We also had to find our bass among 50 basses blindfolded.
I have goosebumps with that. It's like you turn one sense down in every other sense.
Yeah, man, it's just amazing.
Oh, that's so good.
Yeah,
all right, well, I know I need to go to this camp. All right, John, before we go to hot take questions, where can people find you online?
You can find me at reachingresults.com. And you should find lots of resources there. But I have a special resource for your podcast listeners that I mentioned a number of articles, a couple of peer-reviewed articles on the courses that we teach. And I also didn't mention it, but there's a download for a self-reflection kind of exercise. And so it has a whole series of dimensions that you might work on as a leader. And so that download is at bit.ly, bit.ly /reaching results. And you'll put that in the show notes, I hope. And
Absolutely.
they can
Thank
click
you
on
for
that
that.
link. And then
Anything that helps us reflect and become better leaders, powerful. All right. Well, you ready for hot take questions?
Yeah.
Here we go. You're on your deathbed, John. What do you most want to be remembered for?
Kindness.
Nice.
I don't know if I'll get there. I don't feel like I'll get there most days.
You're already there. The world needs more of it, man. What's your most important self-care practice?
Sleep. If I had to pick one, I mean, fitness is super important to me, but sleep is underestimated, man.
Sleep rules all. Absolutely. Well, if you could cancel all your meetings and responsibilities for a day, how'd you spend it?
Reading.
Nice. Ever the lifelong learner.
Yeah.
What best song ever?
Oh man. I'll say Portrait of Tracy by Jaco Pastorius.
Ooh.
Flipping it back to you there.
Oh, I like it. I like it. If you could give your 18-year-old self one piece of advice, what would it be?
Calm down, relax, and be more patient.
Same advice I would give to my 18-year-old self.
Really?
Yeah, absolutely.
I was famous for saying you can sleep when you're dead.
Yeah. From that to now wearing the Aura ring. I love it. You can only wear one style of footwear for the rest of your life. Which would it be?
Birkenstocks.
Yes.
I have them on right now.
Oh, I mean, the most comfortable. And I don't care if it's old dad fashion. They were popular in the 90s and like grunge and all of that. So, John, this has been awesome, man, and totally enlightening. Thank you.
Thank you for having me, man. I'm really grateful for our friendship and for you thinking about me to have on here. And I hope something that I said might be of value to some leaders listening.
Awesome. Thanks for sharing your wisdom with the world, brother. What up, listeners? Hey, I got something for you. If you like my Building Better Businesses in ABA podcast, you're going to love the Behavioral Observations podcast with Matt Sikoria. So I recently met Matt at ABAI, and let me tell you, I was just an instant fanboy. Matt's the real deal. His pod is all about stimulating talk for today's behavior analysts. So session 191 on his pod is on the behavior analysis of lying. That's right, lying. How awesome is that? Who does that? He also talks social skills, ACT, FAs, and so much more. His guests include Greg Hanley, Jonathan Tarbox, and other legendary names in our field. And as a BCBA, you can even get CEU credits through Behavioral Observations. You can find Matt and the Behavioral Observations podcast on iTunes, Spotify, Stitcher, or your favorite podcast channel. Enjoy, friends.
Thanks for listening to Building Better Businesses in ABA podcast. Stay tuned for our next exciting episode. In the meantime, please like, subscribe, share, and comment. We value your feedback. Don't forget to follow us on social media at elementrcm.ai.